Okay, so now we're about to embark on part 3 of our series about getting our own player character set into Unity here, starting with MakeHuman, and we've gone into Blender, we've animated it, and then on the last demo we came in and we imported it and we kind of got the character set up as a prefab. And today what we're going to do is we're going to take that prefab and we're going to add our animations to it. So we have our animations that we know our character has in our FBX that we exported from Blender. And we can see those animations here. We're going to take those animations, we're going to set up an animation controller, and we're going to kind of get all that set up. And then the next demo, so what will basically be part 4, the next demo in part 4 will be taking those animations and we're going to use our code to call them whenever we're moving. So hopefully this is teaching you a lot, and let's get started with this. So we're going to add ourselves an animator. And this animator is actually really important. So I'm going to move that component up. Oh, interesting. Okay, well, whatever. So we have an animator. I think the best thing to do right now is talk a little bit about prefabs. Prefabs are really important because when you have this prefab here, I've made changes in my scene. Those changes have not been copied to the prefab variant that is actually in my new player character. So my new player character has this variant, but if I click on that variant, you'll notice I don't have the animation controller. I don't have, I actually probably don't have the colliders that are on the toes. If I go back in here, and yeah, you don't see the colliders on the toes at all. So one of the things that I'm going to do, let's drag this back and get a little more real estate here. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my player variant under the hierarchy, and I'm going to click overrides, and I'm going to say apply all. And so what's happening here is it's saying that this is overriding the original player character variant that is saved inside the new player folder. By hitting apply all, it's going to take all of these changes that I made, and you can see where the changes are: adding the camera, adding the box colliders, adding the animator, adding the rigid body, all those changes that I made, and it's going to apply those to the prefab variant that we have here. So now when I click on the variant here inside the folder, this variant now has all the changes that I made in the variant in the scene. And stop and think about that for just a second. That's actually really, really, really powerful. It allows you to have a prefab variant that is saved inside a folder that is your base prefab variant, but once you drag that variant out into a scene, you can make changes to it that are individual to each scene or each object that you want. So you could have multiple prefabs out on a scene or in a terrain, and then each one could have a different script attached to it, or a different set of settings, or a different rigid body, or something like that. So this is really important. So now we have our controller here, and I'm going to rename our player character because I'm going to rename it new. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I do have other characters in the scenes, well, actually in this game project, and they're causing me trouble. So we're going to rename this player character new, and it's important to do this in Unity as well, because Unity is kind of keeping track of things. So now I'm going to go back to my player character variant, and now I'm going to start changing my animator. I want to move my animator up in its... it won't move up. Okay, maybe it is at the top. Maybe they flipped it. Weird. Anyway. So I've got my my controller here. So one of the things that I'm going to do is we need to use this controller to, or the animator here to control the FBX file, the mesh that we have in our player character. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create, and I'm going to create a new animation or animator controller, and I'm going to name this player character dash new animation controller. And so I have this animator controller, and if I take the prefab variant and select it, I'm going to take this animation controller and we're going to set it right here to the animator controller. And now I'm going to go to my window, animation, and I'm going to go to animator. And that's going to open this up here. And I personally like it down here so that I can see what's going on with my character. That's completely up to you. Once you have this, now you've got this basic empty set of things that can happen in what's called layers. And layers are really powerful. We'll get to layers in a little bit, but you also have parameters. Right now what we're going to do is we're going to create a series of animations that are going to be based on the character controller that we have. And the character controller allows us to do WASD, right, by default. So I'm just going to hit my thing here, and there's no script because I don't have any script telling it what to do, but I could hit WASD and it would, if I had a script, and it would move around. So what we're going to do is in our animator controller, let's go back to our project and make sure we're opening our animation controller. So here we go. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new state, and we're going to do a blend tree. And this blend tree is really powerful because the blend tree allows us to blend animations together, as you'll see in just a little bit. So I'm going to take my blend tree and I'm going to double click, and inside the blend tree we have another whole set of stuff. And you can see here in the base layer we're now inside the blend tree, and now we have a series of motions. So I can add a motion field, and we're going to go to simple freeform directional. So I'm going to have freeform directional, and I'm going to add a motion, and I'm going to go and add a whole bunch of them. And we'll just do, let's see, we want idle, forward, side, side, up, dash. So we need like 6. I could be wrong about that. We'll go through it. So now, motion 1, position X, position Y is 0, 0. This, we're going to go, and now, and this is where it's really helpful to have it all named player character, because you can see I have humanoids and enemies and all this other stuff. So I'm going to say, oh, here's my player character, player idle. So now at 0, 0, 0, here's my player's idle animation. And you can kind of check it out. So now he's kind of doing this. I don't know what is going on there. Some rotation that's going on. But let's just keep going. So now let's do our walking forward. So if I have my walking forward as my next animation, we're going to go player, and we're going to say walking. So there's my walking forward. So now if we take a look at this, you can take a look at your parameters will be important in a minute, but we're going to go 1. Okay, that moved this one over to the right. So it's actually not what we want. We want it to stay in the center. If you, this is actually, this is kind of like your character from the top. And so this is the sides that you, the direction that the character is going to move. So this is your y-axis, this is your x-axis. So then if I take this and I say 1, now you can kind of see how that is going to go forward 1. So now let's do our running. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say player running. And now I'm going to set this to 0. But then I'm going to set my y to 2. And so there's my running animation, and that's going to be further in speed. And then we're going to go walking back. Let's go strafe to the left. So then I'm going to hit here, and I'm going to go player strafe left, and I'm going to set that to 1. Nope, -1 and 0. And so now that one is set right here. And so then this one will be strafe right. And we'll set that to 1 and 0. And now we've got that set up. And then let's add another one. I was short. And we're going to go walking backwards. Oops, this one. And we should be able to now have that set to 0. And then -1. So now we've got a walk backwards, a walk forwards, a left, a right, and a run up forwards. Now we don't have our parameters set for right now. It's kind of weird. So let's go and set up our parameters so that we can kind of figure out how this is going to work. And these parameters are really important because the parameters are how we're going to use the code to tell Unity exactly what our character is doing. So we're going to go to our parameters, and I'm going to change this. Let's add, and what we're going to do is we're going to add floats, and we're going to take this one, and this one is going to be player forward motion, just like that. And then this one, actually, let's just remove this one. Delete it. Yeah, it is used by the blend tree. Okay, fine. And then we'll add another float, and we'll call this one player side motion. And there we go. So now we have these two blend trees, and we go over here, and we're going to have our side motion first and our forward motion second. I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. And so now in our animator in the blend tree, what you can do is you can start grabbing this and you can slide this. Oh, it's not playing. So let's set this back to 0. So if the forward motion here is set to 0, let's hit play. So what he should be doing right now is he should be in idle, and he is. And you can kind of rotate around them. Again, we've got some kind of jerky little thingamajiggy going on there. I'm not sure what that is. We'll worry about that later. I don't know if that's a Unity problem or a Blender problem, but we'll see. So now if I take the forward motion and I start sliding it forward, now he's walking. If I keep sliding it forward, now he's running. Now you can see that the run feels a little slow. Oh boy, I've got weight problems there. I got to go back into Blender and check that out. But you can kind of see he's running a little slow. If I just take this to 1, the walk feels about right. The run definitely feels like it's not fast enough. So this is a really cool thing that you can do. So I can go up here to my running, which is this one, and I can change the speed of the animation itself. So let's just double it, and then we'll go forward. That feels much better. And this is one of the reasons why I said you don't have to worry about the speed of the animation when you're doing it in Blender, because you can control that speed in Unity very easily. So it's really nice and easy, and that's pretty cool. And so let's just take this back to 0, or actually let's go to 1. And now, if I split my side-to-side motions here, and you can see it's starting to change the animator. So now he's kind of blending equal strafe and equal walk. But if I take this back to 0, now you can see him strafing. And he's strafing to the right, and now he's strafing to the left, well, his right, our left. So this is a very simple blend tree, and it's actually working. It's working really, really well. So we have our basic set of animations here that's going to happen when these two parameters change. When are those parameters going to change? Well, they're going to change once we do our code. In our code, we're going to tell our animator to set forward motion to 1, which would then take the blend tree and move it forward to 1. And that's going to be a different demo, but that's basically what it's going to do. That might even need a little bit of, I don't know, it's a little fast. And this is what's cool, is I can tweak it a little bit while it's playing here. So say 0.75. And Unity does all the work to add keyframes and everything for you. It's really kind of cool. So the animation still looks really smooth. It's not jittery or anything like that. So I'm pretty happy with this. Let's go back to our layers here. Let's get out of our base layer. And let's add a couple other things. So this is our default right here, and that's actually really, really good. That is the default, which means that when nothing else is happening, our character is going to be in the idle state. So when we go back to our base layer here, let's add a couple of our other things. So first I'm going to create a simple state here, and that simple state is going to be our jumping animation. So I'll say jumping. Okay. And now I'm going to add a transition, and I'm going to transition from our default blend tree to our jump animation. And then we're going to actually make a transition back, which is no jumping, or jumping to no jumping, or to our basically to our idle. So we click here on jumping. I can set my motion. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go back down to my player character stuff, and I'm going to say player jumping, and there it is. And now that I've got this, now I have to tell it when to do that. So I'm going to click here. We have more parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set myself another parameter, but this time it's just going to be a true false. It's just going to be a Boolean. And I'm going to call it player jumping. And again, this is going to be set in the code. So now if I click on my transition, my conditions, is it going to be jumping? If player jumping is true, then we're jumping. If player jumping is false, then we're not jumping. So we're just going to do something really simple. You could do it as a float, and there's a reason why you might want to do that, and I'll show you that later in a different demo maybe. But basically for now, that's essentially what it is. So let's set up one more for now, and we're just going to set up our death animation here. And so we're going to do another transition, and we're going to go back, or we're going to go to death, or we'll call it player dying. And actually, I think it's really good. I didn't do this with the jumping. It's really important to set this up for to say player jumping, player dying, player, all that other stuff. And the reason why is so that you really understand what it is. So later on, because player base blend tree. Okay, so now we have our dying, and now we have our transition. So again, we're going to do another Boolean here, and we're going to call it player dying, and if that's true, then it plays the dying animation. So we'll just go to that and set up player dying. That is true, and there we go. Now, one of the important things is that we don't want player dying to go back the other way. We've actually had that happen. It's really kind of funny. Oh, this isn't working. I'll have to check out my animation. I think my player dying animation is not functioning correctly. Oh, it's too short. All right, I'll have to take a look at that. But anyway, this transition, you never want to do a return transition from player dying back to the base tree. And the reason for that is because player dying is the end of that animation. Your character's dead, and they're going to respawn or whatever. Maybe the game is over. A lot of times my students will accidentally do a transition back to the player blend tree, and when they do that, the player dies and falls over and then pops right back into the idle position, and it looks really funny. And so we have a coined a phrase in my class, which is death is a one-way transition, and my students all think that's really funny, but it helps them remember that you don't ever want to return transition from something like a player's death, because obviously they're not going to pop back up and go back to idle. So we are almost done setting up our base animations. We're not going to do crouching yet, because I realized I forgot to do a couple of things, including a backwards crouch and some other stuff. So we're going to set up one more thing, and that is we're going to set up our player aiming. Okay, so our player aiming is going to be something that's a little different, and our player aiming needs a mask. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up one more parameter, and we're going to make it a float, and we're going to call it player, and I can't spell. I'm struggling here. player aiming angle. Still struggling. And this player aiming angle is going to be really important because we're going to use an avatar mask. And avatar masks are really cool. What a mask allows you to do is I'm going to, let's say I'll be running, and I have my animation set for the running and what's going to happen to the upper body. So with that animation, the keyframes are all set for the bones from the waist up. But if I'm walking, let's say walking, or even idle, that the animation for those bones is already set up. But if I'm standing there and I want my character to point his arm or his gun up or down or whatever, I need to be able to take control of those bones and override the animation that's happening in the blend tree. And you can do that with an avatar mask. So we're going to go back to our project, and I'm going to create an avatar mask. So there we go. And we'll call this player aiming mask. And notice that I'm doing all of this in the same folder that I have my new player in. I generally like to do that. Anything that has to do with this character or with this player character, I want to put in the same folder. Folder management is really important in Unity, especially as the bigger the game gets, the more important managing your files and your assets really gets. So that's an important little aside. But anyway, so now I've got my player aiming mask, and I want to use my skeleton from my player character new avatar. So there's my new avatar. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to import my skeleton. And so now it's asking me what I want to control with my player character. And so what we're going to do is we don't want to control the legs, so I'm going to turn those off. We just want to control the upper body, which is the spine and the head. So I'm going to turn that on, make sure that's on, make sure that the pelvis is off, that the root bone is off. Yeah, that should work. And then all these meshes are turned off. Okay? And once I've done that, I should be able to... you can click expand all and just make sure the pinky fingers and all that stuff is controlled. Once you've got that, now that I've done that mask, I can go back over to my animator here. We're going to go to our layers, and we're going to add a new layer. And this new layer, we're going to call player aiming layer. And in here, we have now a whole empty subset of actions. So now we're going to do another blend tree. So I'm going to go here and add a new blend tree. And then we're going to call this player aiming blend tree. I double click in here, and now we have a blend tree. And this time what we're going to do is we have our parameter, which is our player aiming angle. This is how we're going to control the blend tree. So we're going to take this and we're going to add 2 motions. So we're going to add 2 motions, and those motions are going to be the player aiming up and the player aiming down. And our parameter is going to be the aiming angle. And our threshold, we can kind of play with that a little bit, but what we want to do is take our threshold for the player aiming up. We want to take it to like 200. And what you need to do is take your automatic thresholds off. And the reason why we're getting rid of that is we're going to adjust the thresholds based upon the values that we give it in our code. So first, our aiming up value is going to be 200. And our aiming down, let's try that again. And our aiming down and our aiming down will be -200. Sometimes it gets a little funky that way. And now I go back to my layers. I got my player aiming layer. I'm going to click here, and here's where I add my mask. So I'm going to click on the target, click player aiming mask, and I'm going to set my weight to 1. The blending will be an override. So what happens is that means that this mask will override the animations that are happening in the base layer. You can set it to additive so that it adds on top of, or anything, or other things like that. But for right now, this is what we're just going to set it to override. So now I should be able to, and it's not working. Oh, I know why. I know why it's not working. It's not working because my animations are set up incorrectly. So let's go take a look at why my animations are set up incorrectly. So if I go back to my Blender file, let's reopen this up, and I go over to my player aiming down and up, I actually have an animation. I set it up so those animations actually have more than one keyframe. That is not correct. So I'm going to delete that keyframe, take this, grab it, grab my keyframe here, and that should stay the same. Perfect. Okay. So now save, go back to player aiming up. Here we go. Again, I'm going to hit select all. I want to be in pose mode. So now I've selected all of those. I can grab that keyframe. I can delete it. Now you can see I'm set right. Grab the keyframe. No! The G key, not the X key. Set that there. Save. Now, under the old version of Unity, I would be done. But unfortunately enough, now what I need to do is I need to go back and export my FBX again. So I'm going to go back to my FBX. It's going to give me a warning. It should keep all of my settings pretty much. It looks good. Bake my animation. Let's just make sure that's all okay. It's good. It's saying, hey, it's red because I've got one. I'm going to hit export FBX. Now I'm going to, as soon as it's done exporting the FBX, I saved it one more time just because I'm kind of a little OCD like that. And now it's going to import both the new character and everything else. So that's interesting. So if I go back and hit my FBX, you can see aiming up and aiming down are just one keyframe, a lot like the jumping one. Okay? And crouching idle is good. And I'm going to make sure that aiming up and aiming down, they're not looped. Okay, that's excellent. So now I'm going to go back to my animator here, and then I can see as I slide this, it's going to move my character up or down. And it's kind of interesting that he's faced like this right now in the base layer, but that's okay. So he should go straight to idle when he drops. Boom. Now I can't move anything, I can't do anything, but the character is essentially set up at this point for my code. I'm not sure what that animation problem is. What is that? So if you have these little flicks like that, I'm not sure what that is or why. So I'm going to have to go figure that out, and if I figure it out, I'll put it into the next video. But essentially, this is it. I have got my character imported. I've got everything set up. I set up my project. I've got my character in here. I've got my variant. And I've got him ready to go. I've got a basic collider on his feet. We'll do more of those in a little bit. And I've set up my animator. And that's the biggest thing, is now with my animator, I now have all of these different animations set up and ready for me to call with my code. And so that's actually going to be the most important thing, is we're going to call these with code and watch them work. And it's actually going to be pretty fun. And that's going to be part 3 of this whole sequence, is showing you how to start calling these with code and moving your character around in the scene. So hopefully this will get you started in bringing in your characters from MakeHuman, getting them into Unity, and getting them ready to be animated. So with all that, we've now got our animation set into the prefab with the animation controller, and we're ready to start coding. So that's going to be part 4, which I hope to do in another day or so, is going to be how to take our code and call these animations so that when we're walking forward, our character's walking. If we hit the shift key, our character starts to run. If we hit the space bar, our character will jump, and take care of all of those basic controls and bring them into Unity using our code. So if you enjoyed this, if it gave you some good ideas or helped you set up your character, please subscribe, give a like. If I did anything wrong or there's a better way of doing something, please let me know in the comments below. And I always like to learn new things. Hopefully that's why you're here too. So thank you, stay healthy, stay safe, and take care, and I will see you again sometime very soon.